Welcome to the Political Checkmate, and today I am going to checkmate this recent video from Robert Reich called How Much Wealth is Too Much. Before I begin, I want to mention that I am going to be using this article from economist Robert Murphy, who pretty much debunks Robert Reich's arguments in this recent video, and the article I am citing was written back in 2019. That pretty much tells you that Reich is really repetitive. Now that I got that out of the way, let us begin.
Do billionaires have a right to exist? America has driven more than 650 species to extinction, and it should do the same with billionaires. Billionaires claim they deserve their riches, but let's face it, there are only 5 ways to become a billionaire, and they're all bad. Number 1, exploit a monopoly. Jamie Dimon is worth $2 billion today, but not because he succeeded in the free market. In 2008, the government bailed out his bank, JP Morgan Chase, and a handful of other giant Wall Street banks, keeping them off the endangered species list because they were too big to fail. Effectively, a monopoly. Consider another giant enterprise, Amazon. Does Jeff Bezos really deserve his billions for building Amazon? No, because Amazon is essentially a monopoly. It's even been charged by the federal government and 17 states for inflating prices, overcharging sellers, and stifling competition like a predator in the wild. With better anti-monopoly enforcement, Bezos...
First off, Amazon and many of these banks are not monopolies because monopolies are where you have only one provider, but Amazon and these multiple banks have competition. Going to the second point about Amazon being charged for allegations, such as increasing prices and other stuff by the FTC, well, the economist George Ford investigated these claims and he found weak evidence from the FTC because he found that Amazon prices are actually lower than other large online retailers and that its third-party seller fees are consistent with other online marketplaces. On the third point, I agree with Reich that we should not have done the bank bailouts, but I don't think we should do antitrust because it would make firms less efficient in fear they would face antitrust. I would recommend reading economist Dominic Armentono books on the subject of the problems with antitrust. Instead, I would argue we should free up the market to increase competition, such as removing patents because Amazon benefited from it, and do deregulation to stop regulatory capture because a study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that regulatory capture reduces business entry.
Would be worth far less. Number 2, exploit inside information. Stephen A. Cohen, worth roughly $20 billion, headed a hedge fund charged by the Justice Department with insider trading on a scale without known precedent. Another innovator. Taming insider trading would level the investing field between the C-suite and Main Street.
Well, many economists, such as Robert Murphy, have argued that insider trading is actually a good thing because it helps spread knowledge of the stock and it helps make it less volatile. If you want to know more, I recommend reading this article from Robert Murphy and this article from the Journal of Business Ethics, Defending Insider Trading.
Number 3, buy off politicians. That's a great way to become a billionaire. The Koch family and Koch Industries saved roughly $1 billion a year from the Trump tax cut they and allies spent $20 million lobbying for. What a return on investment. If we had tougher lobbying laws, political corruption would go.
I am going to quote economist Robert Murphy to point out how ridiculous that statement is. Everyone get that? Here, Reich is telling us that the way to get $1 billion is to first get $50 billion, then pay a politician to reduce your tax bill by $1 billion. Boom! You just made $1 billion. It's just that simple. Anyway, I would argue that avoiding taxes is actually ethical because taxation is theft. I would recommend watching this old video of mine explaining why taxation is theft according to an academic philosophical paper. Also, the bigger problem is not rich citizens offering bribes to politicians. Rather, It is politicians accepting the bribes because they could be bribed or influenced by any other group. I gotta say that the government itself encourages businesses donating money to politicians because they fear that the government would attack them, such as Microsoft, which originally did not want to hire lobbyists, but then had to when the government tried to attack them through antitrust.
Extinct. Number 4, defraud investors. Adam Newman is accused of conning investors out of hundreds of millions for WeWork, an office sharing startup. WeWork didn't make a nickel of profit, but Newman still funded his extravagant lifestyle, including a $60 million private jet. Elizabeth Holmes was convicted of fraud for her blood testing company, Theranos. So was Sam Bankman-Fried of crypto exchange FTX. Remember a supposed billionaire named Donald Trump? He was also found to have committed fraud. Presumably, if we had tougher anti-fraud laws, more would be caught and there'd be fewer billionaires.
I am going to quote Robert Murphy again. On Reich's telling, investors put hundreds of millions into a company that never produced a nickel of profit, and then we're still willing to pay an additional $1 billion to get Newman to walk away from the wreckage. If Reich's narrative was the only relevant factor, these big investors are incredibly stupid, paying $1 billion for something only worth a fraction of that at most. Or we can summarize that there is more to the story than Reich is letting on. In any event, notice that one of the big investors was J.P. Morgan, which was the subject of Reich's first way to become a billionaire. So at least these illegitimate billionaires seem to cancel each other out.
To preserve. Number 5, get money from rich relatives. About 60% of all wealth in America today is inherited. That's because loopholes in U.S. tax law, lobbied for by the wealthy, allow rich families to avoid taxes on assets they inherit. And the estate tax has been so defanged that fewer than 0.2% of estates have paid it in recent years. Tax reform would disrupt the circle of life for the rich, stopping them from automatically becoming billionaires at their birth or someone else's death. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not arguing against big rewards for entrepreneurs and inventors. But do today's entrepreneurs really need billions of dollars?
The Tax Foundation has responded to the figure that Reich is citing in problems in the way they achieved, but 70% of the Forbes 400 were self-made. Also, 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth in the second and lose 90% of their wealth in the third generation. Going to Reich's second point, if we put a cap on a person's wealth, realistically, people would simply leave the country or retire and stop being innovative since you take away the incentive to continue working. On my last point, I would like to recommend the book Myth of the Robber Barons by historian Bernard Fossum, who points out that amazing entrepreneurs who revolutionized the economy, such as James J. Hill or Vanderbilt, who I would argue would be billionaires even with Reich's criteria because they were born poor, they did not scam people, and ran innovative businesses that helped consumers out by lowering prices. This is the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and please donate to my Patreon so I can make more videos and have your video requests checkmated. And thanks for watching, and have a nice day.